Hi everyone. So this is going to be a little video walking through this Minuet by Giovanni Battista Somis. This is what I handed out in class. It'll be online as well. So this is a very simple minuet that exemplifies the first couple of schemas that Gjerdingen goes through. The Romanesca, as we saw in class, is a kind of opening, sort of outlines a couple of chords. In its skeletal version, it goes something like this. Or if you sort of change the octaves of the melody, it goes about like that. So we'll see a slight variation on that. Then the prinner is a sort of parallel thirds or parallel tenths that starts on scale degree 4 in the bass, 6 in the treble, and simply walks down with a little decoration on the bass. Then the Fonta, as we saw, is a kind of sequence. Here it's slightly incomplete, but we'll get the idea. Fonta is Italian for fountain. It's a sequence that goes down. Then in the second half we'll see another prinner, and then simply a cadential figure. So I'm first going to play through the minuet, hopefully not too badly, to give you an idea. Then I'll walk through it a little bit more slowly to give you the idea of how all the schemas work. So here we are. Second half again, sorry for the delay. So let's deconstruct this a little bit. Let's work through it phrase by phrase. The Romanesca is pretty straightforward. You've got your tonic, then your sort of dominant thing, then it goes from there. But we can see how he's traced out all of the notes that we expect in the Romanesca with some extras in between. So you've got this sort of escape tone here, then the next stage, and then the next stage, and then we have some passing tones. And that's where we expect the Romanesca to end up, E in the bass, G in the treble. So just to make that very clear, here, he's marked it with the circles, but just to make it really clear, this is how the Romanesca is sort of spelled out, and the rest are passing tones that give it some melodic interest. Then this goes almost right into a prinner. So we sort of keep the same harmony, the tonic note changes on the melody note changes on the downbeat of measure 3, and then we're straight into the printer. Right here we've got F, E, D, G, C, just completely tracing the standard printer out, but doing it a little bit quickly. Where we have I didn't quite play that right. I'm going to leave the grace note out. So 1. Then we're right into the next printer, but it's in a different key. So what he's done here is we're in C at the beginning, this printer is in C, 6, 6, 5, 4, 3, but then that very same note is going to then be the start of another printer, and that E is going to become 6 in G. So the way he uses this printer to modulate is that he keeps the very same note. You'll see pretty much the same bass note as well. It's just moved up an octave, becomes 4. So he starts right from there, and he gives us a printer that's in another key. So just to play that for you once, that ends up going, we had our first printer, so 1. Now right into the other one. Suddenly in G. We've got E over C, that's 6. But what I'll point out is I say we're in G. We're looking towards G. But here, crucially, he doesn't quite betray the move. This is still an F natural. He doesn't quite betray the fact that we're modulating until we get down to F sharp here. And finally that F sharp ends up, if we think in modern terms, the 505 that brings us to G. But that's how the first half works. It's very simple. Romanesca into a quick printer, into a second longer printer that happens to be oriented towards bringing us into a new key. And that's all the first half is. It's those schemas right after one another. So next, let's look at the sequence that happens after the double bar. You remember the Fonte, the fountain, the descending sequence, has a slightly different contrapuntal framework. You're supposed to go 7 to 1 in both keys and 4 to 3 in both keys in the treble. And you'll see that doesn't quite happen. You get 1 and 3 here, and then 1 and 3 here, but it's a slight variation. You never get 4 in the melody, and instead of 7 to 1, sort of inverted, first inversion to root bass line, you get 5 going to 1. So it's the same idea. You still kind of get these chords in there. You can look, we see a lot of this scale degree 2 instead of 4, scale degree 5 instead of 7. You can see that they're related, but they're not exactly the same. But what we get is a Fonte that's sort of on D minor, even though it starts on this G. back in C. Oops, sorry. It's so what happens there? We've modulated to 5 at the end here, and we need to modulate back quickly. So we know all about canceling out the new leading tone. You'll see that D minor does that very well because it has F natural instead of F sharp. But what really is going on here, if you think about the way we talked about the Fonta in class, the second step, or the end step, if you have a 3-stage Fonta, is going to be where you want to end up. So we say, okay, we want to end up in C, that's major, so we're going to step up and do a minor version, which is diatonic to C there. So he uses this Fonta that goes 2 measures of D minor, 2 measures of C major. He uses it to very quickly, after the double bar, modulate right back to C. So if I just step back, maybe I'll play the prinner, the big prinner from this first half that goes. That wasn't right. Maybe I'll play the big printer from the first half, which goes something like. That's not marked at all, but it's going to lead us right into yet another printer. And this printer stays in C. You'll see that it's based on F. Printers don't have to be sequences, but this one actually is kind of written as a sequence. You'll see that there's this pattern in the right hand that's hinted at here, but it really repeats. So a printer can also effectively be a kind of sequence as well. So we can hear that getting right out of our. This is where we've been left. So now we have a printer, a bridge measure that goes. That's pointing us towards F, the 4 hair. Again, we're in C. So if we break down the cadence, what we have is a pretty conventional figure. 3 up to scale degree 4, 5, 5, 1. So a very classic cadence, 4, 5, 5, 1. And then here you've got 3, 2, 1, really emphasizing the cadence. And the Hemiola aspect of this is sort of the differing articulations here. This is just 2 measures of 3, where you expect the accents to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And yet the way that it's written sort of obscures that. You have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, where that's articulated first in the bass, and then here at the high point in the melody are giving us these sort of secondary accent points against the prevailing 3/4 meter. So the voices are just sort of offset, they act as suspensions, and that's how we get this Hemiola cadence that goes like this. So that's really all that's going on in this minuet. We can really see how several of the simple schemas that we've talked about in class already are put to good use to create a full piece of music with very little in between. There's really only one measure here that's not participating in some kind of a recognizable schema. The schemas will become more recognizable to you as we work with them. And hopefully this gives you an idea of how some of these can go together in compositions.